Oleg.
Lucas has to come back to the game. It's a 5-minute short power. Carlson shoots that flat. Labanc sends it back across. It's that took 6 seconds, and the Sharks are on the board. And they'll stay on the power play. Logan Couture turns around. He says to the bench, that's one.
I mean, I really hope that Joe Pavelski is okay. Obviously, you never want to see something bad like that happen, but
lots of time to go here in the period and this power play. Lead pass for Meyer with Labanc. Now Labanc with it. Works it back to Erik Karlsson. Karlsson along. Lisa takes it off!
call 5 minutes for that. That's, well, you don't see out of a hockey replay or something. Change the whole
power play. Burns took the hit for Labanc. Back to Brent Burns. Karlsson picks it off. And gathers it back up for Meyer.
Sorry, Gordon. William Karlsson is one heck of a penalty killer. My goodness, he's all over the puck.
Now Labanc with it. Drops it back to Burns. Swings it back across to Chip. Shoots
a whole lot coming in the game. Like, seriously, what is that? It's so disappointing. It's like trying to get involved in the game. The game's not even close. It's 3-0. A couple of 2, okay?
Scene on the Sharks bench. Three power play goals. Logan Couture has 2 of them. There's still 81 seconds left.
5 with something you don't even see. You just call the outcome. It's a joke. It's embarrassing.
What a third period. Erik Karlsson brings it ahead. Karlsson drops it back from the chair to Hurdle. Back to Erik Karlsson. Labanc's got 3 assists in the third period. Long shot tipped wide by Meyer. Now Hurdle back with it. Finds Meyer. Back is Labanc at the point. Works his way in. Labanc walks it in first.
Last year was the Stanley Cup Finals and it was tough to lose. Tonight was tougher than that. Really was the way we lost that hockey game. I mean, like I said, I'm sure you've all seen it on TV. There was no intent. I feel awful that Joe got hurt. You know, he's a class player for their team. You know, everybody loves him. But there was no intent.
That will be the question. Is it mathematically possible to actually kill off a 4-minute power play? The Las Vegas Golden Knights say no. The San Jose Sharks say yes. Welcome to Agree or Disagree, the podcast hockey edition. Well, for Saturday, April the 27th. My name is Kevin Olenek. You can follow me, of course, on Twitter at KVOLE. Subscribe to all podcasts, hockey or not, on iTunes, Spotify, and find me as a friend at Facebook, Kevin Olenek, and like Agree or Disagree the podcast as well. Joining me as always is Tyler. I'm sure Tyler, as a referee, you're gonna when we talk about that, you're gonna have some opinions to.
Oh boy.
to share about that.
Yeah, you bet. Great to be back with you guys after a weekend off, long weekend in Vancouver. That was nice.
Yes,
the weather was good mostly.
Oh yes, yes. You were out here in the land of Vancouver. Yes, and I didn't get a chance to see you, but next time, hopefully.
Yes.
Sean is out in Calgary. I understand it's snowing and people are still crying. Is that true?
Well, we do have some sort of winter storm warning that's coming through Alberta. It's snowed a lot up in Edmonton, but that's just because it's Edmonton.
It's exactly.
Yeah. And yes, still a lot of crying here from Flames fans.
Yes, we were hoping to have Heidi on to get her reactions, but we'll talk to her maybe next week. We've got lots of Canuck news to get into, and the big one I think this week is the signing of Thatcher Demko. 2 more years takes him up to 2021. A little bit over $1 million average value. It sounds to me like this was a really positive signing overall for the Canucks, keeping him in. What were your guys' thoughts?
I liked it. It's a good cap hit. The only issue I have is that it's 2 years, and which puts him in that same year for a new contract as Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes, so that could be an issue, but I don't think he was going to sign for any more than 2 years, and 1 year would have been a bit of an issue as well with Markstrom needing a new contract at that time as well. So it adds the leverage that the Canucks should have a NHL goalie under contract with to work with Markstrom for leverage there. And I think it's a good step forward for him.
Yeah, I know the Canucks just need to figure out the third and fourth and fifth goaltender situation, which crept up to be a problem for them last season. I think I've seen enough from Demko and impressed enough by his play to say he warrants a 7-figure amount. So I think it's a great deal. And I do agree with Sean that there could be some issues maybe with the timing of the contract being up. But other than that, I think it's a good deal.
Yeah, 9 games last year, 4-3-1, .913 save percentage. He's going to be at the World Championships. I think that's going to get him some really good experience. And a guy I feel like is a good cushion of a backup to Markstrom. We've talked about this on the podcast before. It does take time for goaltenders to develop. I mean, even you look at the career trajectory of Markstrom, it's taken a while for him to get to where he's at. I don't know how expensive Thatcher Demko will be in 2021 anyway, though, too. I understand that concern. But I think the 1 and 2 anyway is a good sign. And you do have Michael DiPietro playing very well in the OHL playoffs. I'm not saying that he's ready for prime time in any way, shape, or form, but at least there's 3 goaltenders. The question, I think Tyler is right, although I think how do you find another 2 that you can rely on in the system? Because the reality is nowadays you need 3 at least somewhat NHL caliber goaltenders for the regular season.
Yeah, or if you're Philadelphia's case, I think, 9 or something they used last year?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they got caught with their pants down there, obviously, last year, having to play DiPietro because they didn't have a healthy, signed pro goalie. So a repeat of that is obviously not something anybody wants to see.
Well, they don't have that issue. They shouldn't have that issue next season with the signing of Jake Keeley. DiPietro's just going to turn pro, and Richard Bachman will be back after being injured for most of this past year. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them make another move to add a goalie, depending on how they feel Bachman is at. But they definitely have the depth there for going into next year.
Yeah, that is one area I think that if you look at where the Canucks are going forward, I feel like goaltending is a strength. I think we can all agree there that the way that goaltending has developed has been a strength.
Yeah, it's goaltending's not holding the Canucks back in any way that I can see at this point.
Yeah. What is becoming interesting here in we do have the draft coming up, and there has been a lot of talk about this guy for the last little bit, where there's been a lot of question about the future of Jim Benning. Can the Vancouver Canucks go forward with Jim Benning and feel that they can legitimately compete, or do they need a president of hockey operations? Now, earlier this week, Francisco Angelini tweeted that he has not heard of the guy named Dean Lombardi, but that has...
hilarious.
Yeah. Okay, Google. But the name Mike Gllis has come up as a possibility to be the president of hockey operations or take over in some role. We have talked a little bit about the legacy of Mike Gllis before on this podcast, but is this a guy that you can see bringing back in a president role? Or let's push this a little bit. Would you take this one step further and replace him with Jim Benning?
I like him bringing Gllis in as the president to oversee everything. I think that's a better role for him than being the general manager. He sees things at such a big picture and out of the box way that adding him in that role would really help and benefit the Canucks going forward in terms of exploiting different aspects of the off ice ideas that Gllis did in the past, and he will go going forward. He's spent a lot since he got let go by the Canucks. He spent a lot of his time traveling the world and visiting different organizations, trying to find what makes them successful. And I think that would come in very handy, and he'd be a good person to evaluate what Jim Benning has done and see whether or not he needs to be replaced, or just have his role tweaked and bring in more help to help the Canucks start exploiting the off ice parts of the game and help the players be more successful.
Anybody that follows me on Twitter will know that I'm not the biggest Mike Gllis fan, but there is something to be said about this. One of the reasons why the biggest reason why I didn't care for Mike Gllis much is that it was his drafting, and he just didn't seem to care much about drafting and developing and giving younger players a chance. And then that eventually caught up with him, and he lost his job. But Mike Gillis's strengths would complement, I think, Jim Benning's strengths. You might have a pretty nice tandem there. My only concern about this would be any kind of power struggle there. Like I'm pretty sure if Mike Gllis comes back, he's going to want to be in a decision-making position, right? Like some kind of advisory role. I don't see that happening. And it even seems like a long shot that Mike would want to come back, period, to me. But it is an interesting idea. And, I guess just kind of observing this owner over the years, I mean, you have to think he's paid close attention to those appearances that Mike Gllis has made on TSN 1040 and been impressed by what Mike has to say. I totally see that. So it's not totally pie in the sky, but we'll see. I mean, it seems like getting all the pieces to fit into place for that to happen is a bit of a stretch.
Well, here's where I do see Gllis being at an advantage. Is you've got a Besser contract coming, you've got a Pettersson contract coming, you'll probably have a Markstrom contract coming. There has been a lot of conversation in this market about weaponizing cap space and understanding cap, and that's what I think Mike Gllis, as a former player agent and understanding hockey, I think can bring to the table. It's almost would be it's interesting to me because there would be a unique opportunity where you could have Mike Gllis do a lot of that kind of negotiation, the trade negotiations, and almost Benning kind of run the draft, because Benning's strength is more drafting, scouting. It feels like that's more of his passion, where he's not as strong in the trades and negotiations necessarily doesn't seem to fit that, and it doesn't seem. And I don't think Jim Benning really likes talking to the media. And I think Mike Gllis enjoys talking to the media. So you could have a very interesting complementary piece there if they're willing to work together.
Well, maybe Mike is fine with the media now, but he certainly wasn't before.
Well, I think
he's pretty standoffish a lot of the time. I mean, he's coming under fire. He doesn't like certain Toronto agendas or whatever. I get all that, but yeah. I mean, Jim Benning isn't that comfortable at it either.
Yeah, Jim Benning is more of he's more reserved and not very comfortable out talking in front of the media for public speaking. Gllis is a lot more comfortable, but I think he gets a little more irritated with the constant probing and for lack of a better term, dumb questions that can come out of the media, and has struggled to bite his tongue and not come across as so arrogant and too smart for people. But I think he's learned from that. I think one thing you have to look at what he's done since then. And since he's come out and talked, he's been very candid about what he's done, what he struggled with in his tenure as the Canucks GM. And it'll be very interesting to see if he gets another shot, how different he would be in that role.
Yeah. And I also think it's becoming interesting in the sense, too, because we're seeing there's an interesting little I feel like there's a hockey debate on it, because you got the young guy with all the ideas like Kyle Dubas and John Chaika, but Dubas has been a little bit more successful. Or do you go with the veteran guy like the Lou Lamoriello, kind of that bring in that president of hockey operations that can oversee everything? I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I kind of feel, for me, I like the veteran because they've been there before, allowing the young guy to develop and mature into the role. I think we're seeing that somewhat effectively with Kyle Dubas. I think you can see that Lou Lamoriello has been a help with him, and I think that can help Benning. You look at Brad Treliving; he had a couple years under Brian Burke. I don't see how that would hurt.
No, I like that. I think that's a great idea. And Gllis does have the experience out from his first go with the Canucks to understand what works, what doesn't, and figure out the best way to go forwards and to give someone, let's say Judd Brackett, a little bit longer of a leash to learn and to develop into the full-time general manager in a few years' time.
I guess the one additional point I would make here is that if the new Seattle franchise offers Mike Gllis the job he had before, president and general manager, I don't see how he ends up anywhere else.
That's the question, because part of the criticism or not of, you can think of this as a criticism for Mike Gllis or not, but he is a guy with a pretty large ego, and you know what happened in Vegas with what the Vegas Golden Knights have done. You know that he would love to either A, duplicate that, or B, top it. And that, he already has a coach sitting there that's already part of the organization in Dave Tippett. I'm kind of leaning, I think that would be that probably be what happens, but I think it's an interesting question to see. I do see Mike Gllis back in the NHL at some point in time. There's no question about that. But yeah.
The biggest thing with that Seattle job, though, is that you start from scratch, and Gllis could find a way to basically create the system and the management structure that he wants from absolute scratch. So if Aquilini and the Canucks want to bring him in, they have to basically give him that carte blanche to do that with the Canucks.
And that's the question, I think. Yeah. What happens there? I mean, considering where everybody is right now, and considering what happened with the playoffs, the question becomes: is really, do you need to win the division, or do you just need to get into the playoffs to have an opportunity to get to the Stanley Cup? So that's an interesting thing for where Aquilini comes from. Is okay. Are we really that far out, or is there an opportunity here? I guess that's going to be the real question. And I guess before we get into the draft commentary here, but we'll get into the second round a little bit later on in this podcast. But kind of what you're seeing from Carolina, the upsets, Carolina, Dallas, Colorado, and Columbus. Considering all of that, considering that only two or three home ice advantage teams won in the first round, is there a model that the Canucks can kind of pick up on here, or do you feel that they need to stay the course, or what are your thoughts on that?
You just have to look at what's being successful in the playoffs, and that's speed and strength. A lot of the old hockey men are talking about heavy and size and all that, but it's speed and strength that's actually really doing a lot of the damage for these teams. Just a tenacious forecheck, always on the puck, not letting the skilled players get too much room to operate. So you gotta look at that and see what you can do to bring in that type of style to the Canucks. I think that's the type of style that Travis Green is trying to deploy, but he hasn't had the best of personnel to do that with the Canucks just yet.
Yeah, he just hasn't had quite enough there. Like I would say this past season with the Canucks, they were able to play at a higher tempo and they did better, compared to the previous couple of years. You look around the playoffs this year, if it weren't for the fact that Toronto had some pretty good young players there, would they have been in that series at all? I think that's what kept them in it in the end. Boston still got that championship pedigree. Anderson wasn't that great, couldn't get it done in the seventh game. But that's I think one of the things that helped Toronto was having some speed. You look at the Colorado Calgary series. I mean, Nate McKinnon just by himself was skating around everybody.
Yep.
So speed is the big thing for sure nowadays.
Yeah, it's just, and I think also it's interesting how you approach. I think the other thing that I'm thinking about too in this question is how do you approach the regular season? Because here you have a team with 62 wins that was out in 4. All of the division winners are out. All of the wild card winners got in, and it really, I think a common theme here is how teams built in the second half to get into the playoffs. I think that's an interesting thing. So I think that other part of how you mentally prepare for the regular season will come forward too. But I do agree with you that speed seems to be the common thing here, which leads to the draft part. Cole Caulfield is making a lot of waves. It is entirely possible that the U.S. under-18 team could be drafted 20 straight. I'm being partially facetious, but that team is creating a lot of action, including Cole Caulfield, who had 12 goals in that tournament. Is this a guy that you are interested in, or within that 10th pick? Have you guys set your sights on a few guys that you're interested in, or what are you thinking here?
Caulfield's very interesting. All he does is score. And he's got in 62 games with the under-18 team this year, he's got 70 goals. It's just mind-blowing. I can't remember who had. I think it might have been Jack Eichel or Austin Matthews who had the record for most goals in a season for the under-18 development team for the U.S. But Caulfield not only beat it, but absolutely eclipsed it. It's almost doubled it, I think, at this point. And it's that he does score, but one thing he doesn't, he's not a quick skater. So I think that might be a bit of a disadvantage to him, especially for his size, because he's only 5'7". But he's definitely someone you have to look at based off of the goal total alone.
I think for the Canucks, if Caulfield keeps up the scoring, it's hard to see him still being on the board by the time the Canucks get to pick.
Yeah.
And the size is a bit of a concern for me. The Canucks have some undersized people already. So, yeah, but I mean, anytime you can add scoring, everybody wants to do that.
Yeah, because also in there is some of the other kind of names in there. Look, is Cameron York, Alex Turcotte's moving a little bit up the board as well. There's Trevor Zegras. Matthew Boldy, as I mentioned as well. So it is going to be interesting. We'll talk a little bit more about that going forward. You also got, it looks like Bowen Byram is going to be a top 3. There is possibilities of Kirby Dack and Dylan Cousins could drop. So there is some options there. There's Victor Soderstrom, Ville Heinola, Philip Borowberg. So there is some options there. I think, which is nice. It's almost like you can't necessarily go wrong with your 10th pick.
No, because there's some options on defense as well, and the Canucks could, as we saw this past season, use more depth on defense. So I know in the Craig Button TSN mock draft, he has Thomas Harley, who's the Mississauga defenseman, sliding in at the number 10 pick there, and that guy's been playing for Canada at the World Under-18s.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to kind of what happens there. And as I said, we'll be talking a little bit more about the draft as May continues here. Is there anything other Canuck related stuff that we didn't get to that we should?
I would say that news today: Troy Stetcher got an invite to Team Canada for the World Championships. That's a really good opportunity for him. I think he deserves that based off the season he had.
Yeah, nice little reward for the year he had, for sure.
Yeah,
and nice to be recognized.
Yes, also, of course, Thatcher Demko playing for the U.S., Elias Pettersson playing for Sweden, and Louis Eriksson playing for...
And Markstrom.
Markstrom, yes, and Markstrom. Yeah, Louis Eriksson, that was probably... Some Canuck fans were scratching their heads. How did he get on that team? But that could be a pretty good thing, though, overall, again, because that's an option for the Canucks to get some trade value for a guy if they're looking to trade him. So...
Yeah, and I don't know how other countries look at this, but I think it's pretty clear with Hockey Canada. They when you answer the call and you don't say no down the road, you get the benefit of the doubt, particularly for Olympic teams. So. So I think the Swedish hockey people there, they really like Louis Eriksson. He's answered the call a number of times, and he can still help them in some form. So there he is.
Yeah. What do you mean?
Can't forget Quinn Hughes is playing for the U.S. as well.
That's right. Yes, and Demko talked about how that's going to be a benefit for them as well, getting to know Quinn Hughes a little bit better as well. I think that it's going to be it's an interesting way to kind of continue your development, especially I think for Demko and Hughes. I think that will be great, and for Pettersson as well. I think being in a semi-higher pressure environment where I think Sweden is always expected to do quite well in these tournaments, I think will be beneficial for him as well. So, so I think that going forward, that's good development for the Canucks going forward. Let's move on to the other big picture news. And I know that many in Canada were saddened by the Leafs and the Bruins, but we're not going to talk about that because you can get that elsewhere. What we are going to talk about is probably one of the most memorable games I can remember in NHL playoff history. And we played it off the top. The San Jose Sharks coming back from a 3-0 deficit midway through the third period on a penalty that a 5-minute major to Cody Eakin and allowed the Sharks to gain the lead 4-3. Jonathan Marchessault did tie it, went to overtime, and then Barclay Goodrow wins the game in overtime. So, Tyler, I'm going to start with you in terms of the actual call. Not that Sean doesn't have an opinion, because I know he does. But from your perspective, as a referee, what happened there?
Didn't look like any of the four of them were really sure what happened. I have to just take guesses here, but the referee at center ice was the one who had put the arm in the air, from what I saw, after he saw Pavelski down on the ice. So he must have thought he saw some kind of shove or whatever, but whatever they thought they saw is not what happened. And by NHL standards, that's not a penalty. Now, in the Hockey Canada rules, amateur levels, it's very clear. Whatever is an infraction, if it results in an injury, they want the 5 in a game called. But that's not how it typically goes in the NHL, and they decided to do that here. And then, of course, it blew up into this huge turning point in the game. So what's really stunning about it is that you got 4 of them out there. The linesmen have the authority to give their interpretation of what happened to the referee, and they all came to the conclusion that a 5 in a game should be issued. And it's just mind-boggling that they could get that wrong, especially with 2 very veteran referees, Eric Furlat and Dan O'Halloran in particular, who in the first round, among the referees that were working the first round, he had the most playoff appearances, done 10 Stanley Cup finals. Just really, really bizarre that this could happen to veteran referees, but it does underscore again how quick the game is and how challenging angles can be sometimes and how tough the calls can be. And I mean, we've seen bad calls many times before in the playoffs, but we've never seen it turn out quite like that.
Yeah, when I look at it again, to me, I think what happened was that the refs didn't quite see it right in their direct vision and saw it in their peripheral, most likely, and then just saw the cross-checking motion from Eakin, and then saw the result. So they just went with what they thought was the right call and went from there. And it just it blew up, and just it's tough for the Vegas Golden Knights, but the drama it created was just fantastic.
By the way, just a quick comment on the clips you played there at the beginning, Kevin. How great was Ray Ferraro there? Just having a time. Just another refereeing comment, though. Being the down-low referee on an end-zone face-off like that, you're across the ice, you're kind of lined up on the bottom of the circle. I always find refereeing, as soon as the puck hits the ice, you want to anticipate the play, right? So as soon as the puck hits the ice, you're looking to see who won the draw, where's the puck going to go, do I need to get ready to look for a shot? You start looking at all these other things except what's happening right at the face-off dot. And that's where the contact was made, and then, I mean, I'm sorry, it's just hard to get around the fact that you see the guy laying there, you see the blood, the fans start tossing stuff on the ice, and then the penalty call gets made, right? That's just not going to sell with anybody.
Well, it was because if he just falls, there's nothing there, right? It's the blood that I think really turned everybody to think, okay, there was something. But because even, I think if you get a chance, listen to Ray Ferraro, find the audio clip on TSN 1040, because his explanation of what he saw was really quite fascinating to me, in that nobody knew what was happening. He didn't even know what was going on. There was something that happened, and then it became the 5-minute, because they were taking Pavelski, they were moving him out, but they didn't know what really was going on. There was a lot of things that were happening there. And if Ray Ferraro, I'm not saying that Ray Ferraro is smart on the referee, but he's down on the ice. If they couldn't figure it out, I don't know how we could. Part of the problem here is I don't know how we could figure out how the referee is supposed to make a clear determination on something that they didn't. Not Marcia shows right, they didn't see it, but they didn't have it. They didn't have an opportunity to really see the play again.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know. Maybe they felt with the score the way that it was still a pretty safe call to make. I don't officiate that way. I don't look at it and say, well, it's a major's not a big deal because it's a 3-goal game. I mean, I don't look at it that way, but I don't know what NHL referees think. I think, they probably felt that I'm sure none of the 4 of them felt it was going to turn out like that. I think that's pretty clear. I don't think that they saw their call as a game-changing call under the circumstances at that moment.
Well, you didn't expect Vegas to give up 4 goals on that penalty kill.
Yeah. I mean, you just don't see that. I mean, you see 2, maybe 3, but never 4.
Yeah, it was only the second time in 20 years of playoffs that actually happened.
You know, I mean, it's a 5 minute, probably score 4 times. You got to score every minute, basically.
Yeah.
Like you just don't see that normally.
Yeah. And we'll get to the Golden Knights in a second. The one thing that I'm a little confused about is the supervisor of the game, the supervisor. What's his role in that? Because does he not help and say, okay, help me, what did you see up there? Was there seemed like there was no communication. That's, I think, the biggest problem with it.
I mean, I'm guessing between the third period and the overtime, the supervisor probably interacted with the referees, and they may have had a look at what happened there. I really don't understand what a series supervisor does either, quite frankly, because it's not the same referees that work, in the first round. Not the referees rotate amongst the different series. When you get down to the Stanley Cup final, there's 4 referees, there's 4 linesmen, and they do a rotation throughout the series to get them all in there. But in the first round, I mean, they're moving all over the place, doing different games here and there and everywhere. But the supervisor, stays with a series. So I don't know if that's maybe to try and, help the referees gain an understanding of kind of the feel of the series, the heat of the series. It almost comes across like you're filling their heads with too much, just let them go out and officiate.
So I guess the question comes down to, should coaches can't challenge include these type of penalties, or how do we go forward with this? Does it need video review?
Well, I think we're heading down that path at some point now. It's because of just how spectacular this turned out. I can't see it being a challenge type situation, though. I think that's subject to a lot of abuse, and if you did that, you'd have to make it like the offside challenge, where if you get it wrong, it's a penalty. I don't know. There's a lot of subjectivity with like a major penalty call such as that one. So, but some opportunity for the referees to review to see if what they saw or what they thought they saw is what actually happened. That's maybe workable. It's a big change, though. You're really departing from the tradition of the human element of the managing a game and having a feel for the game.
I think there definitely will be some sort of review process for 5-minute majors going forwards. Whether that is a video review of the refs looking on that little tablet that they have in the scorer's box, or if they even just communicate back to Toronto, or even the off-ice official, or have an off-ice official for every game type deal that you can communicate to and say, look, this is what I saw. Can you confirm that's what happened? And if they confirm that, then they continue on with the 5-minute major. But if they don't, then they have to figure out what they go on from there with.
Yeah.
I mean, we could look at this and say, it was just one kind of unusual circumstance, a bit of a freak accident that happened, and let's not knee-jerk react to it. But the masses are not screaming for calm here; they're screaming for change. So I think change is coming.
Well, here's the thing, too. To me, if you're a Knights fan, I guess you can complain about the call. But let's not get the Golden Knights out of anything here. They had a 3-1 series lead. They were pretty much in control of this series too. It was a pretty comfortable 3-1 series lead. They didn't win in Game 5. That was kind of understandable. That was in San Jose. They threw 60 shots at Martin Jones in Game 6. They completely outplayed the Sharks, and they couldn't get it done. The Sharks forced a Game 7. As we've already talked about, it's been 20 years at least since the team has allowed 4 goals on a 5-minute major. If you are a championship team, I understand you're getting frazzled and stuff, but that can't happen. The collapse here is a lot. There's a lot that's got to be taken into the Golden Knights and what happened here. And yeah, Cody Eakin is one of their top penalty killers, but 4 goals in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, that's not the ref's fault.
No, they just totally collapsed in the face of the adversity there.
And I would almost argue, even if it became a 2-minute penalty, that the Sharks were going to come back anyway, because they saw blood and they saw an opportunity and they took it. So I think there's a lot of credit to how the Sharks played there too. I think Logan Couture is a future captain in this league. Like that guy is an absolute beast, and so is Kevin Labanc too. Like they have got some really strong players there too, in my mind.
Well, and Couture has been a playoff performer for a long time now too.
Yeah.
I mean, I go back to 2013 when the Sharks played the Canucks and swept the Canucks. I mean, Couture was a force. Yeah. So, Kevin, are you saying that the Sharks smelled blood and we're going to come back no matter what?
Yes.
Yeah, that and they proved that you can kill off a double minor.
Yes, they did. They did.
Yes, the Twitter account.
Oh, come on! That was really funny, and I think the other question that I have about this part of it, though, with the Golden Knights, is what happens to them going forward. Like, is this one of those things that hurts the friend? Like, what Gerard Gallant said was really interesting in that was a tougher loss in the Stanley Cup final. I'm really curious what happens to them going forward.
I don't think it really changes them too much, other than just add some more fire to them next year. They have a really good team. They lost in Game 7 in overtime. You can't really try and change too much to avoid that. They've got Cody Glass coming up, turning pro next year. They've got 2 absolutely just dynamite lines up front, and they can still have some trade chips to go, and still lots of cap room to use for say an Erik Karlsson.
Both for Vegas and Toronto, you have to wonder, and I haven't seen this talked about much, but you have to wonder the lack of a captain, was that kind of a problem for them when they got into the crunch? You know, I don't know. I think that I could see both those teams making a decision there before the start of next season.
Yeah, it is an interesting question. I'm pro do think that you need someone to have the C on. I know that there's some disagree with that, but somebody should have found a way to like something happens that needs to calm the waters there. Now, I mean, did you think Gallant should have called a timeout earlier? What were your thoughts there?
Yes, I would have liked to see that.
Yeah, he totally needed to call a timeout after even the first goal.
Yeah.
As you saw how fired up the Sharks were. And like for me, it's like you don't necessarily need a captain. You just need strong leaders. Because you look at what happened with the Sharks there. Like it was their captain that went down. So Joe Pavelski had no bearing on how to rally the troops. It was Logan Couture. It was
but they see the troops rallied around him because he's the captain, right? That helps, I think. But
yeah, I don't think it would have mattered like who it was.
Yeah,
they would have rallied around it no matter what. If it was Joe Thornton, if it was Logan Couture, they would have rallied around that because they've got such strong leadership, and it's not just one person.
Yeah,
it's Well, it's kind of interesting now too with Pavelski hurt. You got Joe Thornton doing a lot of the post game media obligations in Pavelski's place. It's like what's old is new again in San Jose.
Yeah. Can I just say Joe Thornton looks a little bit like Gandalf? It's just like that's Gandalf. Is that Gandalf? A little bit there. It's just they have quite the beards. I guess we'll just quickly, because we did touch on it, we'll talk about the Leafs here. Mike Babcock did not make a lot of friends in the media after the Game 7 press conference and after the season-ending press conference, the perception they had is Babcock took no blame. It wasn't his fault. And Kyle Dubas basically apologized for the popcorn at Scotiabank Center. He basically put it all on him. What do you see going forward there with Dubas and Babcock? Can they survive? And is this impacting Mike Babcock's legacy?
I think they'll continue on status quo going into next year. But I do think that there's going to be someone will go if they have any more conflict in how to build the team and what style of team and what style of player they want.
Yeah, I don't see any change with either of them in the immediate future there. It's only been one season. Dubas inherited some challenges with contracts and how well everybody's playing and trying to make all that work. And Babcock is, much more experienced in hockey, is highly paid. The guy that hired him is still there. So I don't know. I mean, I'm of the belief that if somebody's going to go, it's going to be Dubas and not Babcock. But we'll see. The question about legacy. Yeah, I think maybe that's it is a bit damaging the way it went this year. I mean, that's the first time we've really seen Mike Babcock under such fire for his direct decision making. But all of us are making a lot of assumptions. I mean, the fact was, he's got a full bench there. He said he believed that Patrick Marleau needs to be out there at the end. People wanted to see Austin Matthews play more, but the coach felt Austin Matthews wasn't going to get it done. So, and I don't know, if you're the coach and you're paid more maybe than the general manager and you were there first, you're going to stick to your guns on that. It's an odd dynamic.
Is Babcock sold on Austin Matthews as the rest of the league? Is Babcock seeing something in Austin Matthews that we are not seeing?
I think just Babcock is being going with what he feels is the best opportunity to win, and with more veteran players. I think that's all it is.
Yeah, I mean, coaching is a lot about trust. Who do you trust the most?
And Tavares was the matchup center, and he deserved to be out there. He played really well. He may not have produced at a top end rate, but that was because he was in charge of shutting down the Bergeron Marchand line, and he did an okay job at that. And they just and Bruce Cassidy was able to get the right matchup against the Matthews line, and Matthews had his moments, but he was a minus 3 in that game, in the game 7. So it was plus minus is a flawed stat at times, but you got to look at that in those short term in a one game thing, one game sample size. It does actually show a little bit of how well he played, and I don't think he played well in that game 7.
Yeah, I think that Babcock. I agree. I think Babcock is. Yeah, I think he likes his veterans, but and who he trusts, and I think that there's a really good learning experience for Austin Matthews. It kind of reminded me of what Mike Keenan did to Joe Thornton a little bit, in terms of just pushing him to be a bit better. And I've sort of seen Babcock doing that with Austin Matthews, and I think that Matthews will be better for it. I mean, I understand why you want to throw the guy out there, why fans want to see him out there, because he is a dynamic player. But if you can't trust him, you can't trust him. And just as a side note, can we give some credit to Bruce Cassidy here? I mean, this guy's
absolutely.
Really an underrated coach. He has done a very good job with a team, that may be a lot. They finished 3rd overall, for the love of God. Give him some credit for how well he has kept this team together, all things considered.
He's really come into his own as a coach, I think, and keeps it simple.
Yeah.
He's a very simple, just listen to his press conferences, very comfortable, doesn't make it rocket science. He's got he's got a pretty gritty team, and he's pushing the right buttons these days.
Yeah.
He's one of the best coaches to listen to in press conferences, honestly.
Yeah.
He's very honest, very refreshing. Doesn't try to hide things, and explains exactly what he was thinking very well.
Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of focus on the Leafs in Game 7 and how, deployment of the players and all that. I mean, let's just call it like it is here. They blew that in Game 6. I mean, They had to win that in Game 6. They're on home ice. You got the lead in the series. Everything's set up for you, and you just didn't play well. You just got outplayed in Game 6. That's where the series was lost to me, not Game 7.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of was thinking in my head, the winner of Game 6 would win the series, and it was Boston. And I agree with you, and Boston knows how to win for sure.
I know it's kind of excuse making, but so the odd person has pointed out the fact that it was an afternoon start for Game 6, and the Leafs don't play very many of those because of television purposes. They always have weekend games at night, and Boston a little more familiar with the afternoon starts. But then again, I mean, the Leafs came out hot. They scored the first goal in Game 6, so they should have had it.
Yeah,
it just came apart.
Yeah. It was the stanchion that took some time off too. I think that as well, but it's about knowing how to win in those moments too. Because that would have been a night game. I don't know if it's a night game. I don't know if it's any different, but. Moving on to the second round, speaking of which, so we had our NHL playoff bracket, and like I think everybody's NHL playoff bracket, I think we were all done after after one round.
I had 3 out of 8 correct.
Who is winning this playoff bracket?
Right now, Tyler's actually tied for first. But everybody else had 2 more opportunity to gain points.
Yeah.
Right now, it's tough to say because it's like, Kevin, you're tied for third with myself, but you're one of 2 people who actually has a chance to actually put up a decent amount of points based off of your picks for going forwards, because you still have Boston.
Yeah, I decided to not go the Tampa Bay route, even though I admit I picked Tampa Bay to win the Stanley Cup, but I went for the bracket strategy. I went, everyone's going to pick Tampa Bay. I'll pick Boston and see what happens.
A guy that I play hockey with, he just for the heck of it, picked all the underdogs. I think except for the Islanders. There was a couple, but he picked mostly underdogs, and he got, I think, 7 out of 8 right. The only one he had wrong was he had Vegas, and he should have had Vegas right.
Yeah.
With that. So, it was quite something. So you're the underdogs.
Yes, it is. So going into the second round, we've got Carolina. We've got the Jerks facing the Islanders, which is sad. It's not at Nassau Coliseum. It's in Brooklyn. I'm saddened about that. You have Boston hosting Columbus. You've got the San Jose Sharks killing off 4-minute penalties against Nathan MacKinnon and the Colorado Avalanche, and the Dallas Stars versus the St. Louis Blues. I know that we've already are one in. Do you have a particular? Is it worth it to even make picks, or are we just going to be wrong again?
Well, I've got. I think Boston's just gonna. They've got the experience of knowing how to win in the playoffs. I think they're gonna find a way to beat Columbus. I've got the Islanders going over Carolina, which is an interesting series because you basically have 2 teams that haven't really had any playoff success or even been in the playoffs for a while. And then, again, same thing with the Sharks. They've got enough experience to know how to find a way to win. I think they'll work out a win over Colorado, and then with Dallas and St. Louis, again, another series where you got a couple teams who haven't really had much playoff success. I've got St. Louis going through. I just think their depth is going to outwork Dallas's top end team.
I got all those the same, except I have Colorado over San Jose. one of the concerns for me is Pavelski being out hurting the Sharks, and I think in goal, I don't think that Jones is a definitive edge over Grubauer, and Colorado, they just the level of confidence they've been playing with so far in these playoffs. Even though they lost last night, they still they're impressing the heck out of me, and I like their chances in this series.
For me, I have Boston over Columbus. I just think I think it's going to be a long series, but I do think Boston is going to prevail. I do have St. Louis over Dallas because I really like what I'm seeing from St. Louis. I have San Jose over Colorado. I just think the emotion of what happened. I think when you fight off a 3-1 series deficit and you fight off a 3-0 series lead, you've got a little bit of lady luck on your side. So I think that's a bit of an advantage. And I'm picking Carolina over the Islanders. I think that there's got to be one upset, and I think the fact that series is not on Long Island, I think is actually an advantage of Carolina.
I agree with that.
Yeah, it's not just not going to be the same, and I just think that that's mostly a flip. And in Carolina, people forget they came back from was it 2-0 or 3-0 when they came back? It was 2-0 at one point for Washington, and they came back to win that series. So
it was in Game 7 you're talking about.
Yeah,
it was 2-0, and then it was 3-1. So they had the 2-goal deficit twice.
Yeah, and Justin Williams is a guy that knows how to win. So I think that these will be long series, though. I don't think that we're going to get any sweeps, but I think so. I think we're in for a long part of hockey there. Is there anything else we want to touch on?
Just one thing. I think we need to congratulate Jannik Hansen on a great NHL career. He retired as of yesterday, so that's someone that endeared himself to Canucks fans as a very good spark plug player.
Absolutely, and a role model for Danish hockey players, and to try and grow the sport in Denmark. He was, in his time in the NHL, one of the top Danish players, and he got a selection to the World Cup of Hockey there with Team Europe as well. So a pretty solid NHL career.
And one other thing, where were you on April 26, 2011?
April 26th, yeah, that you know what this is.
I was watching the game with a couple of friends and making a fool of myself in front of them once Burroughs scored.
I actually was working in television here in Terrace, and so I was on the night shift, and I went to the local Boston Pizza, had the camera out to document the craziness. And pretty quiet night, pretty quiet. A lot of long faces there when Taves tied it up and the game was going to overtime. And then, just the explosion of relief and jubilation and all those different feelings when Burroughs finally ended it.
Yeah, that was quite something because it was a 3-0 series lead. It was a 1-0 lead in the game, and that was
that penalty in overtime to kill.
Yeah, that was as big of a goal in the Canuck franchise history as you will ever imagine.
Oh yeah, and just how he hammered it into the net too. Just very spectacular moment.
Yeah, and not to Jeff Patterson reminded everybody on Twitter that they haven't won a series since that year. I'm sorry. Sorry, I'm just. It's actually. I was surprised. I was like, "Is that right?" Because they didn't win against the Kings, they didn't win against the Sharks, and they didn't win against the Flames. Yeah, wow.
It's hard getting past the first round. I mean, you could look at. I mean, he's right about that, but you could look at a lot of franchises and say, "Well, they haven't won a series in this long." I mean, look at that. I mean, the Maple Leafs, they haven't won a series since 2004. I mean, the Flames, they've won one playoff series since 2004. There's a lot of that.
Yeah, I mean, Washington got to the Cup, but they've been struggling to get past the second round. It was just quite surprising. How do we follow you guys again?
I am Beardy Canuck 03 on Twitter.
And I'm at T-Noble, T-N-O-B-L-E.
All right, and so join us next week. Saturday is May the 4th. It's Star Wars Day, but we will be talking hockey. Not sure if we're going to have a guest. We might have a guest. I'm going to try. We've got. I know we do have May 11th. We have a guest. Sean, tell us who's coming.
We've got Derek Newmeyer from Future Considerations Hockey and Defending Big D, the blog for the Dallas Stars. He's the Western Canada scout for Future Considerations and Dallas Stars prospect expert for that blog. Okay.
And we'll also be talking about Justin Dowling as well, which Sean has a personal connection with as well. So stay tuned in a couple weeks for that. But tune in next week. We will talk to you all very soon. Bye for now.
Campoli has it, flips it, Burrow steals, cutting in, shoots, scores! They've slayed the dragon!